Great. Welcome, everybody. I hope you had a good lunch. There's none of this Facebook Live stuff, so we can just start, which is great. Um, so welcome to this session. We're going to talk all about online news video. And in the last few years, which I guess is why you're here, it's become a big thing. We've seen the sort of explosion of new formats, particularly of online video. And the purpose of today is to try and understand what is working, what does success look like, and also a little bit about what consumers want and how we can use data and analytics to help shape what we do. Um, so that's the focus of this panel. It's a little bit of a hybrid in that we're each going to go through a few slides, try and keep it to around sort of 5 minutes each, and then we'll discuss, and then chance for you to have to ask questions. So I'm Nick Newman from the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. We wrote a big thing last year about the future of online news video, which you can download for free from our website. I'm just going to take you through a little bit of the research that we've been doing. We have Natalie Malinarich, editor of Mobile and New Formats BBC News, to my right, and then to her right we have Nick Wren, who's the vice president, head of news partnerships, EMEA Facebook. Who's going to talk about some of the lessons that they've learned around some of their formats. So that's the format. That's the idea. Just sort of kicking off, I guess. We've been studying this sort of every year since 2012 in terms of the different formats in online video. And one of the sort of surprising things, in a way, is that video is maybe not growing as fast as you would expect. So this looks across a number of different countries. So more people are not using online video than are using online video. And there's big disparities between countries as well, sort of quite low in some countries like Denmark and Japan, and around 30% or so in places like the US. But obviously, video has been growing a lot and growing very fast within that. But I think one thing to remember as we talk about video is that still the sort of underlying preference of people is for text. So overall, 78% of people in all markets, when you ask them about preference, say that they're mainly consuming in text. And you can see around 10% are doing kind of half and half, which is the red, and then the mostly video, sort of 5% or whatever. And it's kind of quite surprising because on television, it's such, it's a video-led format. It's incredibly popular, incredibly easy, but the exposure of all these new formats hasn't transferred yet onto the internet. And when you ask people in focus groups and stuff, what's the reason for that? Is when you're in that sort of active mode, when you're in that lean forward mode and you're looking for information, it's actually speed and control that people are looking for. And yet, where video comes into its own is supplementing that with the drama, and on particular stories or at particular times, suddenly video takes over. So mostly it's supplementary, but for certain types of things, it becomes the core thing that people want. The moving picture is more compelling than getting to the bit of information that you want fast. So it's just something to bear in mind as we sort of go through. The other key finding is that it's, I guess, the only online format that is essentially mainly about distribution. So text articles, for example, are mainly consumed on the websites of publishers, whereas video is not doing very well on publisher websites. So 6.5% of publisher pages. We did this with Chartbeat last year. They're looking at a whole load of about 150 publishers. And we're looking at what percentage of their pages actually have video on. It's only about 6.5%. Very different for Facebook, that obviously you have a lot of video exposure, not much video exposure, but that video exposure isn't even delivering much time. So only 2.5% of the time is spent on video within those news sites. So most of the growth, most of the innovation in formats, we're going to hear about this in a minute, is coming off-site, where you have, first of all, the autoplay, and then the short texted videos, and then Facebook Live and Periscope and all these kind of things, and a huge amount of the time spent. This is particularly true for young people who are spending more time off-platform as well. But I should say that young people have no greater preference or less preference to watch video. This is a myth. So they are consuming more video, but their preference when they're in active mode is still for text, which is really interesting. We did some work with Newswhip where we looked at what works and what doesn't work. And again, this is changing the nature of what gets shown. Video is a very different medium, as any television journalist will tell your editor. What you show is very different from print. You need the pictures to be there. And in the case of the offsite traffic, so this is looking at shares and the kind of content, the top content from 150 publishers. It's entertainment video that is, or more lifestyle-y content that tends to do better than news content in many cases. So that obviously has implications for where we're putting our resources. If more of this is being consumed off-site and it's actually changing the sorts of things that we're producing, how do we feel about that from a journalistic point of view? Those things we could pick up. We talked at the beginning of the year to a range of publishers around Europe, 150 editors, CEOs, and digital leaders about what they're thinking about in terms of their overall priorities, and video is very much on their mind. So they're very much thinking about investments in video, but also they're thinking about the monetization questions. Where are they putting their money? And this was in January, and they were looking at short social video, live video. So again, those off-site distributed platforms is where they were putting most of their effort. And you can see they're a German publisher talking about planning to build up a whole new department this year and produce lots of news videos. And then a little bit less is looking at the quality of video on their own websites, and then long form and virtual reality, much less. My personal take on this is I think a lot of this will tie into the monetization discussion that we'll probably have. But short form is essentially becoming commoditized. As more people move into the market, harder and harder to get attention within that Facebook feed. So this might not be the best strategy, even though most people seem to be doing it. Live video, in my view, is not an efficient way of delivering information. If you think about from a consumer's point of view, it's an attention poor world. And so that live video, obviously great for big breaking news or exclusive music or something you're passionate about like sport, but outside those areas, it may not be the best way of delivering. Nick may take a different view on that. And I think a lot of the most interesting potential over the next few years are actually going to be further down the bottom. So long form video, areas where you can get sponsorship, where you can reuse that content that's got a longer shelf life. And maybe we'll talk about some of those things as well. So just a few stats to start us off. And I'm going to hand over to Natalie, who is going to talk about from the BBC's perspective. There you go. Talk a little bit about what makes success, how do you analyze success, and how do you drive format change during that period. And we'll pick up with questions, so do think about your questions in the meantime. And we will come back to that.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm just going to start by questioning the way we describe digital video, because it's such a broad category that it's almost meaningless. It basically just means you're putting video on the internet, and kind of the reaction we get in the news and when you say, can I have a digital video, is that, and that's quite right, because you're not saying anything specific. So I'm just going to be a bit more practical here and look at just quickly how we think of it, and then some examples of how we've approached this. So, obviously start with a story, but then you need to think really, what platforms is it going? Is it going on your own platform and another one? And if it's going on more than one, are you going to use the same format? Does the same format work for Facebook than for your own site and YouTube? Are they different types of storytelling, or do you take completely different approaches to the story? Then I think it's also really interesting to think, who's your audience for the video? Now, video is really resource intensive. It's very expensive to make properly. So, targeting does make a lot of sense sometimes. And that's when you can work out actually what success is, because unless you know all those things, you don't know what to measure really. And I think you can measure different things for different videos. I'm going to talk about a few of the things we've done. So the biggest thing we did last year was we focused on video for mobile, and I spent about 18 months working on something we called Videos of the Day, which lives in our app. And what we set out to do was to rethink how we tell stories for mobile audiences, which by now is most of our audience, but also how do we get people not just to watch, not just to get more people to watch video, but also how do we get them to watch more videos per visit? And for those who haven't seen it, we came up with this service that's in the app. The idea is very much, it feels very native to mobile. You swipe through the stories, it's updated throughout the day. But we wanted to make it finite so that it wasn't an overwhelming experience, so that you could actually get through 7 videos. I don't expect anyone to watch 7 videos in one go, but at least swipe through and pick a few to watch. We thought a lot about time of day. What you need in the morning might be quite different to what you need in the evening. So we start every morning with a look ahead to the day, just like here's a quick briefing. And we're really kind of thinking of younger audiences for this. we also put a lot of effort into storytelling. Like, traditionally we'd put a lot of TV clips on our website, and it just kind of jarred. It didn't really work on a phone. It wasn't that kind of personal feeling. So I'm just going to show a brief example of some things we've done.
Strong hands.
You get the idea there. So, this is easier to do with some stories than with others, but actually we did do a lot of work on tone. We think, mobile's a very personal medium platform. We want to reflect that in our storytelling. The pace is already faster. People have very short attention spans. I know mine has shortened considerably over the years. Also, visual, mobile is a very visual thing, and so we really want the colors to pop, the pictures to come at you, and just make it really interesting and kind of keep your attention all the way through, and to make it relevant. So we've done a hell of a lot of work on that. But the other thing is, and I think, Nick alluded to short form being commoditized. And I think part of the problem is that often you look at your Facebook feed and everything actually looks the same. And so it's quite hard to distinguish. So we put a lot of work into kind of experimenting and trying different things. And the reason I really like this one is because this was a year-long BBC investigation into the trafficking of chimpanzees in Africa. There's a very serious TV piece with David Schuckman, I think 2 nights in a row. And we just really wanted to do something that just worked on mobile because a lot of the investigation had been done over WhatsApp. So it kind of felt that it lent itself to it. So this was the result.
Ibrahim. Okay.
That bit always gets me. I was trying not to my phone.
Hi, I've been working on this investigation for the past year.
So one of the interesting things about that video is obviously we had very different versions for TV, a very different version for the website, and that one for our app. But we also did one for Instagram Stories, which was one of our most engaged stories on Instagram Stories. And you can see why, because it kind of lends itself to tapping through. It was a bit shorter, but it was essentially the same story. So again, it's thinking from the start, how are you going to serve your different platforms? And again, Nick talked about commoditization of short form. We think, there is a market for long form, particularly on tablets. People do like to sit back and watch longer things. There's also, we do a lot of really in-depth journalism. So why should people who don't actually watch TV lose out on it? So we've experimented quite a bit with longer form. And here's an example. This was a 3-month investigation by Ian Pannell in the States, and he followed a lot of drug addicts through their rehabilitation. We had about a week's worth of footage, just rushes, which is like drives piled up like that. And what we ended up with was a 7-minute package for the main bulletin for the 10. And this version for the website was actually 12 minutes long. It was much longer and really different, like very, very different to the TV version. And then a third version, which went on social, and the app, which again was very different. I'll just play the beginning of this. But
kids in high school are actually talking about using heroin and like bragging about it like they, drank a few beers last night.
I'm addicted to heroin.
I'm going to stop with that because it's quite harrowing. But part of the thing we found is that if you're going to commit to 12 minutes, we need to give you a reason to commit. So we worked really hard on that. That teaser's about a minute long, but it's really punchy, and it did what we found. And what we actually wanted to achieve was to get people to stay with the video for long, and that's what we achieved. We got, if the video was 12 minutes, I think the average watch time was more than 8 minutes, which, considering that that's all the people who jump off after a second, that's really impressive. And then the final thing I want to talk about is like when you just target particular audiences. And like many people, like many websites, we have had more difficulties reaching younger women at times. And we're trying to address that. And one thing we've done is set up a Facebook page called Like That, which is specifically for younger women. And so there was a big story in the UK recently about people missing their cervical cancer screenings, like 1 in 4 women missing them. And we just wondered why and how we could do this for a different audience. And this is what we came up with.
I reckon I've seen most of Manchester's fannies.
I think the only thing that stops people having them is being embarrassed. Yeah.
So that did really well on Facebook, but I think what's more interesting is it did reach the audience we wanted. It reached women below the age of 35. It also generated a huge conversation around why people were missing their smear tests, why they were scared of them, and why they were quite happy to go and get waxed but not have a smear test. But it also generated lots of questions, which led to a follow-up explainer piece. So that didn't go on the website, didn't go anywhere near the website, but that achieved what it wanted again. So I think just to wrap up and hand over to Nick, I think if you're setting out to do video, which I say is very resource intensive, I think what is the point? What are you trying to say that's different and that you can't say very easily in text? You know, who's it for and where's it going to go? And then, you know, just keep on experimenting, because otherwise everything just looks the same and it gets really boring and hard to distinguish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think really interesting to see the BBC trying to innovate there and trying to be true to the brand, but at the same time to incorporate some of these new techniques. And it's you know, a lot of experimentation required, a lot of thinking. We'll pick up on some of that in a minute. So going on to Nick Wren from Facebook, who's going to take us through some examples and also show us a little bit about the new monetization, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been doing a lot of work with a variety of news organizations around Facebook Live. And although we started testing Facebook Live about 1.5 years ago, it's only just over a year that everyone has had the ability to use Facebook Live. So we've learnt a lot of information since then, and it's really interesting collaborating with news organizations. So I'm just going to give you a taste of some of the things that we've been looking at. First of all, some numbers. Nick gave you lots of numbers. Here's some kind of an alternative look, if you like. You know, we've seen 1/5 now of Facebook videos are live broadcasts. So the take-up of live has been rapid and huge. And a 4 times increase in daily watch time over the past year. Engagement is really high on Facebook Live, 10 times more likely to get a comment or a like or a reaction than on a regular piece of VOD. And I think if you do Facebook Live very well, you know, you're looking at people, it becomes very social. You're drawing them into the conversation if you get it right. And a 4 times increase in people going live at any 1 minute. This was between May, just after we launched it publicly, and the 6 months after that. But worth remembering as well that 50%, half of video on Facebook is seen by people sharing it with you. So it's friends and families, you know, recommending it or putting it on your timeline. So creating video which is very shareable, which entices people to pass it on, which causes a reaction or emotion, is the key to success. So soon after we launched Facebook Live, we did a focus group and asked people why they watched it. This was people who did watch it, why they watched it and what they liked most. And we broke it down roughly into these 5 categories. One, obviously, it's of the moment. It's relevant like that. It gave the chance to give perspectives that you wouldn't necessarily see. You could take people places or give them access, be it backstage or red carpet, or take them to parts of the world where they would never get the chance to go otherwise. That it was very social. People love the fact that they can be part of the broadcast and they can shape the broadcast and have their questions answered in real time. that it's authentic, that it's not broadcast television, that it's okay if the camera's a bit shaky, so long as you're getting the genuine person and not a TV persona. And of course, it's live, so anything can happen. And I just wanted to rattle through a couple of examples. These aren't necessarily the biggest or the best. They're just ones which we were interested in as we worked with our news organizations and news partners that we work with. First of all, Facebook Live isn't just for big news organizations with big resources. This was the Northwest Evening Mail that had a fire in Barrow-in-Furness, and they really owned that story for throughout the night during this fire. They gave people, the real-time updates, and within 2 lives, got nearly 100,000 views, which is comfortably bigger than the population of Barrow-in-Furness. They just did it really, really well, and they found that a lot of people who didn't necessarily live there, but used to live there or had friends or family living there were tuning in to have a look. No one else was doing that story at that time like they were. The Blackpool Gazette got nearly 500,000 views for the demolition of some 1960s tower blocks, and they just did a very nice job of keeping people there, knowing that the only action was going to be when the tower blocks explode. But they built up that sense of anticipation. So it doesn't have to be an exploding watermelon. It can be a tower block as well. And we're finding increasingly that Facebook Live is becoming part of the political process as well, not just mainstream politics, but local politics as well. And it's a great opportunity to extend the discussion and extend the ability to talk to policymakers or elected officials in a way that you can't always do. The ITV Live with Theresa May last week had in excess of 40,000 comments and questions during the course of the hour. That one I've shown you, so I'll skip that. Thank you, Blackpool. Shot ahead. We've found as well that with Facebook Live, it's not necessarily the breaking news that will get all of the traffic. You'll get a spike with breaking news if you do it well, but often the day 2 story is the one which gets a lot more views, especially when you take a step back and give people a reason why they should care about a story, or tell them what's going to happen next, or inject some emotion into it. I mean, this was an example with Dagens Nyheter in Stockholm. And this was a day after the Stockholm terrorist attack a few weeks ago, when they offered people the chance to come and thank the police and the emergency services for the work that they'd done the day before. And it had a huge, huge number of views and comments and a lot of emotion, and I think connected a lot of people socially just through that. And again, you see the camera work isn't necessarily broadcast quality all the time, but it just hit an emotional nerve with people. News organizations took a lot of flack for not getting down with the people for Brexit or for the US election. I think there were some really, really notable exceptions. For example,
I did my car like this. This is my car.
Okay, let's see that. What's your name?
Max Chira.
Max. Let's see your car. So your car.
It's right down below. They wouldn't let me bring it up.
Oh wow!
here.
So we can actually see this, perhaps.
Huh?
And how much did it cost, and how long did it take to get that?
It cost $1,000. Took 2 hours to put it on.
Now I have a question. What reactions do you get when you drive around with that?
I get a lot of thumbs up.
So again, this is just Vox Pops or MOS, but done really well, and allowing people to talk to the people from all over the world can bring the story to many, many more people in real time. And it's not just news organizations or journalists that can make the news on Facebook Live. We've had some notable user-generated content, or people doing some amazing reporting from live events, or you have 2 congressmen who get snowed in and have to do a road trip from Texas to Washington DC in order to vote, and they're from different political parties, and they carpool and take questions from not just people in Texas, but people around the world as this thing gathered momentum during their road trip. They talked politics. They argued about politics. They agreed about politics. And they also did.
I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher.
And I don't know how many people watched this or read about it, but it was an incredible thing. It just gathered momentum over quite a long period of time, to the point that, you know, they were going into donut shops and people were telling them which donuts to buy for the road trip. And it was fun, but it was also it was kind of refreshing, because especially if you look at US politics, you know, you realize that people with opposite political views can get along. And can have conversations with people and have a civilized discussion about society and politics. So little things like that give you hope. Some journalists have been doing amazing job of just being authentic. I'm just going to single out one, because he was one of the first guys who really started it, with Rasmus Tantholt. Done a lot of war reporting, a lot of lives from Syria, from places where you just can't go. And this particular one, he was covering the US election, but you just get the real deal.
Beklager, at forbindelsen den ryger så meget. Vi har været i Walmart, vi var ude og køre bus, vi er på vej fra New Orleans til byen.
But when you walk around with him, you're like walking around with an expert. And you know, he's like your friend, and you just get that sense of connection and attachment. And then you can do surprise and delight, like honoring Britney Spears' birthday, or if you're the Lad Bible, you buy 4 brand named ice creams and put them on the roof of your Manchester office and see which one melts first, and sit back and watch 6.3 million people watch it. So I'm going to close with this one. One of the things that we've been constantly working with news organizations is great. You know, video, be it video on demand or Facebook Live, can get a lot of eyeballs and get a lot of engagement and reach. We can reach people in different countries. Excellent. We need money. And having spent most of my career in newsrooms, I understand that. So we're just launching ad breaks for both Facebook videos on video on demand and Facebook Lives. And if you haven't seen them yet, you may have seen 1 or 2, because we're just starting to test them. They look a bit like this. Oh, hang on. There you go. So this is your piece of video content. This is a video on demand. And we want to be transparent about when the ad comes. So you'll see that little pill, as you call it there, look, announcing that the ad's going to start. There's a second of a black slate. And then when the ad runs, this is a 15-second ad. You get both the countdown clock and you see the scroll bar down at the bottom, so that you know, hang on, I've only got a few more seconds to sit through, and then you're back with the video. So we're just starting to test this. You'll be seeing more videos within ads on your Facebook feed, and as usual with Facebook, whatever we start testing, and will probably change quite a lot over the coming weeks. But I wanted to give you a taste of that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Nick. Some really good examples. Oh, worthy of applause. So I was just watching that, and whenever a video came on, people's eyes kind of lit up. The energy just completely changed. I mean, I think what it shows is the power of video, and whether that's exploding tower blocks or, you know, funny ones about Trump shaking hands or whatever. It is an amazing. It eats our attention. It's a very, very powerful medium. And I guess that's my starting point as a question is, should we be worried about that? You know, is it changing the news agenda? Is it, you know, as a brand, you know, BBC, you know, you could just show lots of tower blocks and get lots of reach and report that through using video. And is there a danger of squeezing out serious stuff?
I don't think there is. I mean, I think, you know, there's always been a place for things that are either amusing or just eye-catching. You know, we've always done fantastic picture galleries. There's always been something that's, you know, you can't just have terrible news all the time. There's plenty of it. And I don't think that's reduced at all. If anything, it's increased, I think, with just more devices and more platforms. I think, you know, people are, I think the danger is always comparing metrics. I think so when you look at, you know, exploding tower blocks and you go like, but why did my video in Yemen not get this? You just need to understand that it's a different audience and the different times of day. And I think there's always a time of day when you need a break and you need something fun.
I mean, Nick, you talked about
Well, I think first of all, just quick one on the exploding tower blocks. I think that was a serious story because it brought together a lot of people who had lived there or who knew it, and it had that social connection. They were all chatting about, I remember when, and it's been a long time since I lived there, and I hope they improve things. And the people were talking in a positive way about about a community. So I think that's a good thing. I think to me it's all about choice for broadcasters or publishers, and giving you the choice of different formats for different stories. And Channel 4 have shown that done well and done with power. Stories about hospitals in Aleppo can get tens of millions of views and all around the world. So it doesn't have to be the case that a serious spinach story is not going to work on on social media.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up. Thank you. I'm going to open it up in a minute for questions. I guess the other thing is about sort of formats and how you effectively think about. No, actually, maybe another thing to talk about is just the sort of platform and the brand and the relationship between them. The way in which seems to me that certain formats that have become incredibly popular wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the platforms. So things like short texted videos. And what's your role there as a platform? Do you advise, because you don't make the content, but do you advise how to make best use of these formats? Are you making it up as you go along? I mean, what's the relationship? And similarly, from your point of view, from a publisher's point of view, how do you think about the opportunities opened up from platforms and the challenges that creates? This whole platform publisher thing and format creation.
Yeah, so the media partnerships team within Facebook and the news partnership is one part of that. We break it up into news, sport, and entertainment. Exists to work with creators of media content, in my case, news organizations, and figure out what their goals are, first of all. And that might be to reach audiences in a new country. It might be to experiment with video. It might be to grow engagement, or it might be to make more money. And then work with our product.
Why can't they work that out?
Well, and work with our product teams to help them get there. And so we're going to be one part of the solution for that. Exactly. Yeah.
I think we learned so much from different platforms. I mean, if you think of videos of the day, it's learned from Facebook, it's learned from Snapchat and Twitter moments and movements. And I think what happens is just the volume of people on those platforms is so big, and I think they have a really good understanding of how people actually use technology natively, and we just learn from that and take some of it. And I think that's why things like Facebook Live is a great way to learn more about live, even if you want to take it onto your own platform. It's a fantastic way to learn what works.
You're the BBC. I mean,
there's a difference between live television and live on a phone.
But my point is, why is it that the innovation is coming from platforms and companies creating these new have amazing?
We're just slower. Okay, I think the reality is
it's a very honest answer. Actually, it's about agility, I guess, and also knowing what the possibilities.
I mean, Facebook has some very clever engineers and product people, and we don't have a ton of journalists or people who make content. The BBC has a lot of people who are very, very good at making content. So it's if we get it right, we can marry the two.
It's a really interesting new dynamic.
But I also think social platforms do drive changes in behavior. So if we did that first, I'm not sure we would achieve, we would have achieved the thing that Facebook achieved.
Yeah. So individual publishers on their own don't have the power to change that. Okay. So
bring the mic to you because we're for the video.
Hi, Neil Aiden-Orty. Just a quick question about everything we shoot is 16:9. So when we're going onto mobile, it's just that problem of, I just wondered your thoughts. How much video is going 16:9 versus square? And I see other publishers now are actually letterboxing to make it square with the titles above it. Just wanted your thoughts about Facebook and BBC, just how you get about the workflows and what's working.
We've seen more people shift when they've got the resources, shift to one-to-one for Facebook, simply because it's just more native to the platform, to the size of the phone. It's great if you've got the resources to be able to do two sizes. We understand that some people don't. We've seen 1:1 when you can do it work better than 16:9. But ultimately it depends on what content you've within Facebook, yeah. But ultimately it depends on the content itself, not just the size.
Yeah, so just very quickly on that, we've seen people really engage with vertical video. What we did was we've changed the way we shoot videos so that we can shoot them once and resize them. There is a lot of work involved, but there is, I think it's ARD has an app that allows them to reshape video almost automatically. So I think there's stuff on the way that will help you, but it is about learning how to reshoot, how to shoot things slightly differently so that it fits all those different ratios.
It's definitely new technical. And output it in different ways, but to do it really well for a particular platform, it's always going to be better to do bespoke, but you're going to have to make compromises, and the key thing is knowing your audience, knowing your strategy, knowing where you're going to need to focus.
Hi.
Question back.
Can I interject there? Hi, Jason Rick, CRO at Trint. There's a question for Nick. Just interested in how you regulate and vet the content that goes live on Facebook.
So we get millions and millions of pieces of content on Facebook every day. So the vetting is done by the community. We rely on the community, on people to report things when they contravene our publishing guidelines, our community guidelines, and if they do, we take them down. Sometimes we do that quicker than at other times. So we're constantly working on ways to improve that. But simply because of the scale, it has to be a technical solution. We're not going to employ lots of editors to make those editorial decisions. It will be driven by people.
A question for Nick. Just going back to the audience for a second, the data that you showed in your slides was really quite striking and very compelling, that the audience demand for video wasn't necessarily growing and was quite a lot smaller than text. And yet, despite this, companies, I'm from the FT, are still going ahead and investing in video. So what's your take on this discrepancy, and what do you think is the right approach for going ahead and investing in video anyway?
So I think the discrepancy is partly shiny new things. People are persuaded by 10 times increasing growth in something rather than actually looking at the comparators. But I think I think something new is always exciting, and I think it's also just difficult to work out. And then there's the sort of the cost of doing this as well. So sort of balancing. This is a big change for many organizations as well. So for newspaper organizations thinking about video and what's involved with that. And also, you've tried it before, right? So at different times, video has been tried and hasn't worked and hasn't produced the numbers. One of the most striking things for me is that disparity between on-site and off-site. And I think one of the reasons for that, and Facebook has done, I think, an awesome job in making the experience really good, getting the friction out of the way, not putting pre-roll ads, for example, in the front, which people hate, and people hate more than they did last year as well. In the focus groups we've been doing, it's been really striking how much people hate it. And so that's one of the reasons why growth is really slow on destination sites, because the experience isn't very good. There hasn't been enough thought about the content. You just slap an ad off TV in front of it. And until media companies really start addressing that and think in an audience-facing way, then you're not going to get the growth that you need. And you won't get the monetization offsite in the same way, which is why it's important to build up your own properties, build up your own destinations, have your own relationships rather than just be driven by the platforms. And I think that's what's been going on. The platforms, have done a very good job in driving these new behaviors, but that's probably not always in the interest of publishers. You need to build up the other stuff as well.
Hello, this one's for Nick. Oh, Nick with a K, sorry. Hi. I'm Kalle, I'm from the Finnish Broadcasting Company, and I would like to ask about analytics. Could you share some thoughts about what the direction is you're going with, what data we as publishers can see in the future compared to now? For example, time spent in videos, which is getting much better right now, and so on.
Yeah, we're working on that. We enhanced our video analytics recently to include more geo information and more gender information, and that seemed to go down very well. So we've actually, as part of the Facebook Journalism Project, which is a title for a number of things that we're doing globally, you know, with journalists and with publishers, we've got a working group going on looking at data and what data publishers want and what data we can give them over and above what they have at the moment. We're actually finding that there's quite a lot of data in Facebook APIs which is available to publishers, but which isn't necessarily in a great UI. You know, it needs a big download of a spreadsheet and then someone to kind of pour over it and make sense out of it. But there is quite a lot of data available that outside of what you see on Insights. So we're figuring out how to improve that experience. If there's something specific that you want that you don't have at the moment, let me know afterwards and I'll feed it back.
John Jordan from Video Elephant. One of the data points you had, Nick, with a silent K, on your data on board was you had 6.5% of publisher pages have video. Yeah. And do you have data as to where that was like a year ago or 2 years ago? And where do you see that number going to? And what's going to be the big driver towards an increase?
So I think it has increased. So this, just to contextualize, this was some work we did with Chartbeat. So these were publishers who were publishing video. They were by definition interested in video. So it's probably actually higher than the market rate. I imagine it's moved significantly for all the reasons that I talked about since we did that, which was probably in about a year ago, actually. So the original groundwork. I think the answer to where it should be obviously depends on what the audience wants and depends on the sort of capabilities and looking at where they value video and where they don't. But I would think a better split. Let me put it this way. I think that core video on news websites is now becoming a core expectation. People, you can't take it away, and this is the problem for publishers. You actually have to produce video. If you're a newspaper, you have to produce videos. You have to spend money on it. You have to buy it in. So the key there is making it as seamless as possible and making it as relevant as possible on your own site and making the experience brilliant on your own site and finding some way to monetize it on your own site. I think the other interesting thing is about destination is thinking beyond that around where this might go with new platforms. So when you're not thinking about this sort of active mobile kind of world, which is one world, the other big companies are thinking about television and long form, not for a mobile screen, but for a television screen and the new platforms that are come out of that. And so I think that's the long-term game of people like BuzzFeed and New York Times and the economists that are investing in early mover advantage, building up the relationships with publishers, with advertisers, to create great long-form content and positioning themselves, because ultimately a lot of money will be made in that area, I think. Whereas short form, I think, is hygiene. It's just part of the news landscape now in a way that it wasn't a few years ago.
Just to add to that, we've so the BBC in the past 3 years we've made 2 big changes to the app. Both times we made video easier to find and to watch, and what we've seen each time is an increase in video views. So I think it is partly that a lot of the time websites is quite hard and it's like you have to click loads of times or tap loads of times, and we make it very hard for people to watch. And I think the second thing that we've seen in our app is that people who consume video also consume more text pages, so they are better, more loyal visitors. So there is value in that as well. Once you get people to watch video, you get them to consume more of everything.
It's very much holistic. This is not video or text or graphics. About what's the best way to.
My name is Grania. I work with independent.ie. When we're looking at video at the moment, one of the things we'd love to explore is long form, but obviously it's more labor intensive, post-production, all parts of it. So if you are to do it, do you have any advice on time of day? For example, tablet in the evening time, weekend, when do you see your long form doing well? Because during the daytime, I imagine a lot of us rely heavily on mobile.
I think long form does work on mobile. I think evenings tend to be a bit higher. I also think a lot of websites, and I include us in this, we have a lot of churn and we just put something up for half an hour, for 2 hours and think, oh, people have seen it. And you forget that people visit once a day or maybe once a week. And so it's about giving it a longer shelf life on your site. And actually even we often, video long form, we often republish at weekends. So we'll publish it the date's supposed to come out because it's tied in with other broadcast things, and then we'll republish on Saturday or Sunday and give it a whole weekend, and then we see more or less equivalent numbers.
I think we're coming to the end. We'll just take one more and then one final question, and then we need to finish.
Hi, I'm Alison from Today FM. I'm just wondering about reach and posting video to your platform, and how that affects content that comes after it. Is it the same with written content, or does video need that extra time to breathe and grow?
So the reach is determined by how people consume, horrible word, but how people consume your content. So if me on Facebook, if I don't look at any video, if I hardly ever watch video, I will find that after a while, the top of my newsfeed will have very little video. If all I watch is video, then I'm going to see that stacked, really densely at the top of my newsfeed. So all down to personal consumption. So everybody's newsfeed is a very unique experience. You and I could like the same 100 news organizations, but our newsfeed would be different depending on whether you went in and commented a lot or liked it or shared with your friends. So the interaction with the piece of content is what matters. So there's no relation between a video that you post in 1 hour and an article that you post the following hour. They're treated as as individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I can go into more detail afterwards if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, just one final quick question. So everything is moving incredibly fast. I mean, in the last year, just the number of changes that we've seen. So we're here next year. Say, what's it going to look like? It's going to be round video, zigzag video. How many new ad formats will you have introduced in a year? Will live be dead? I mean, what? In the next year, what are your predictions? Sorry to put you on the spot with this somehow. I know it's horrible. Any thoughts about where we'll be in a year's time?
I think storytelling will continue to change, and I still think within short form particularly, I think it will become more episodic. I think it will go more down the Snapchat reaches and Instagram stories of kind of very quick snaps within a story, which I think is really interesting, and I think kind of big websites are catching up with that.
With ads in between.
Yeah, for some, yeah. And then I guess, we always talk about VR and 360 and still difficult. I think it'll increase, but it still won't be massively mainstream.
Still emphasis on form and getting that right optimization of form.
Yeah.
I think there'll be a bigger discussion within the news industry about how to make longer form video work. And I'm not talking sort of a 23-minute show. It's more, 4, 5, 6 minutes, because I think that will be an opportunity for revenue in a way that there hasn't been before. And we are, but I think there will be other, I think there will be other opportunities as well. So the challenge will be, how can you create content of that kind of length, which with an ad, with a mid-roll experience, which will be enticing and change the story arc to get people into an ad and entice them to stay through 5 to 15 seconds of the ad and come out the other side and still watch. It is, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
There's demos going on until 2 and then more at 2.